At this moment, I'd like to introduce our speaker. Professor Enrique Chaux is a leading scholar in Latin America. His contributions have been significant, not only through his academic work, which integrates psychology, education, and a broad perspective on the social sciences, but also because of his translation of this work into policy and into intervention. Based on his research and the existing evidence, and acknowledging characteristics of the territories and communities where he works in Colombia, he first developed a curriculum on citizen competencies, competencias ciudad anas, articulating a perspective that promotes civic engagement and positive relationships with preventing violence. Later, he developed the program Aulas en Paz, which is classrooms in peace, Aulas en Paz, which focuses on the generation of positive school environments starting at the peer level with a multi-component and multi-level approach. That's something that Dorothy talked about earlier today. Aulas en Paz is still a reference for Latin American interventions for both preventing violence, but also promoting and nurturing educational environments. So at this moment, please join me in welcoming our speaker to the stage, Professor Enrique Chaux.
Thank you, Samir, for the presentation. Thank you, Dorothy and Melissa and everyone else who has been involved in this wonderful conference. I would like to start by asking a question of imagining yourself in this situation. Imagine yourself that you are in a very difficult country with high levels of violence and also high levels of aggression and violence in the schools and surrounding the schools, with limited resources, but with a great Minister of Education. A Minister of Education who believes in research, who believes in academia, and who thinks that education can make a big change in the life of children, can make a big change in preventing violence in the schools and also outside of the schools. And at the same time, you're in the country very decentralized, where decisions about what to teach and how to teach it are made at a local level. So in that context, the minister asked for your help. And the country is Colombia, the minister, Cecilia Maria Vélez, and the researchers were a group of us. Jose Fernando is here, and other people from different parts of Colombia were involved, and I was asked to be the leader of the group. That was 20 years ago. In 2003 and the beginning of 2004, I had just graduated from my doctorate. I was very young in the field, in the research field. And what we decided to do together with the Ministry of Education was to create a policy in which there were some standards that were already happening in mathematics and in language. In mathematics and language in Colombia, there were some standards that were saying what students were expected to learn, but not how they're going to do it. The how was a decision that each school would be able to decide. So we created what was called the Standards of Citizenship Competencies. By the way, citizenship competencies is very similar to socio-emotional competencies, only a little bit more political. I mean, it includes more participation as a citizen to try to transform reality around the lives of students, the life of schools, but it includes a lot of what we knew at that time that was crucial to promote peaceful relationships and to prevent bullying. So, for example, the standards, we created a structure that was divided in 3 big areas. One is what in Spanish is called convivencia, that I never find a good word in English for it. It's more like peaceful relationships and coexistence, but it's a little bit more than that. So that was one of the big areas of of the citizenship competencies. Another one was more political, and it was the democratic participation. And another one was directly related to diversity. Diversity was a crucial issue, it's still a crucial issue, and we wanted to make it, to highlight it. So to promote diversity, to promote multiple identities and pluralism. So those were the three areas. The standards were divided by grade, and we had different types of standards. Some of them were very cognitive, some were knowledge, and some were thinking, for example, critical thinking and also creative thinking. Some were emotional. Big part of it was emotional, for example, empathy or emotional regulation. And some related to communication, like, for example, active listening. And we also had what we call integrative competencies. Integrative competencies, a good example will be conflict resolution. That in order to deal with conflicts in peaceful and constructive ways, you need to manage your emotions, manage your anger, take the perspective of others, be able to create many alternatives, reach an agreement with the others. All of that needed to be integrated. So we had the integrative competencies. And at the same time, just as it was happening in mathematics and in language, there was a national test of citizenship competencies that we also helped create. And the national test was implemented in the whole country. All the public and private schools, urban, rural, in all the areas of the country, had to take the exam. We had to run very fast to create that. And we had an exam that, in a way, it was cohering with the competencies, but I think we're all receiving an alarm. Okay, and the idea was that the ministry did not have like a national curriculum. There is no national curriculum in Colombia. But the ministry will be saying, well, this is what we expect students to be able to learn, and we're gonna measure to see if they're reaching that. We're not gonna give results by student, we're gonna give results only by school. So the students were not signing their names, it was anonymous, but the schools will be receiving their results in order to know what they needed to improve and how they were doing in comparison to other schools, to other regions, or even to their same schools in the past. And at the same time, we had conferences, initiatives, programs, and publications. So this was huge in Colombia. That was 20 years ago. And I want to show you some of the standards. We included, of course, some standards related to bullying. We were, at that time, already doing some research about it, so we made sure that some were related to bullying. So, for example, we included some standards related to empathy, to assertiveness, to critical thinking, and I knew the work by Deborah Pepler, I knew the work by Cristina Salmivalli, so of course we put a great emphasis on the role of bystanders. And I'll show you, I'll read some of them. For example, from 4th and 5th grade, I can act in an assertive way. This means without aggression, but clearly and efficaciously to stop bullying in my school. For example, when a defenseless classmate is repeatedly mistreated. So you can see the role of bystanders there and the role of intervention, defending in an assertive, not in a violent way. I express empathy, similar or compatible feelings. I was very much inspired by Martin Hoffman's work on empathy and Nancy Eisenberg, to excluded or discriminated people. That was 4th and 5th grade. 8th and 9th grade, I understand that sexual orientation is part of the development of each person's personality, and I reject any discrimination related to this. So we were already working on homophobia at that time. And in 10th and 11th grade, I identify prejudices, stereotypes, and emotions that make feeling empathy for some people or groups difficult. I explore ways of overcoming these beliefs and feelings. And another one, I recognize acute discrimination and exclusion happening now or that occur in the past, in my country and in the world. I relate them to the discrimination I see in my daily life. So we were at that time trying to promote these competencies, but not as a subject area, but more integrated into the traditional areas. So here, for example, we wanted to be integrated into social sciences, especially history, very much inspired by facing history in ourselves. I don't know if you know the program. If you don't know it, I highly recommend it. To be able to understand history, the history of their own context, of their own country, but also history in other contexts, in other countries, and to relate that to their own lives. And as a great way of promoting empathy, of understanding what can be occurring around them and what they can do to change, for example, discrimination that it was occurring in their own context. So this was huge, as I was saying. There was a massive campaign. The standards had more than 1 million copies distributed all over the country. All 5th and 9th grade students took the national test. We had many conferences. The group was, we were going all over trying to explain what these were. But then very quickly we started realizing that there were some problems. We started seeing that many schools were not really changing their pedagogy. They were using the same practices that they were using before, but with a different name, with a new name of citizenship competencies. I have to say that not all, this is like the majority. There were some wonderful exceptions, but in the majority, we started not seeing the change that we were expecting. In Colombia, as well as in many other countries, traditional values education is very important. So in traditional values, there will be schools deciding some values, and for example, honesty or respect or tolerance, and there will be like trying to convince students that those values are very important. So there will be posters all over, or songs in which they will be singing about honesty. And there will be like awards, who's the most honest student who's gonna win the award this month. And that's totally against the pedagogy behind the development of socio-emotional competencies. Socio-emotional competencies are not developed by telling people what to do. They're developed by making them have the opportunity to put the competencies in practice and learn by doing. Learning by doing is a crucial pedagogical principle for citizenship competencies, for pedagogical competencies. So we were expecting to have many more projects led by the students themselves, or to have simulations and role plays and projects and discussions of moral dilemmas and many activities in which they would be participating, not in which they would be like passive, receiving what the adults were telling them that they should do. And we started finding things like, for example, that many schools in traditional education, in traditional values education, were doing like beauty pageant in which there will be only women, only girls. They will be representing different values. So for example, there will be Miss Honesty and Miss Respect. And what we found, and we found it in different places in the country, is that remained, and it was changed for citizenship competencies. So for example, the most ironic for me, was Miss Critical Thinking. So that made us really think about what was happening. And one of the first conclusions that we reached is that everything was based more in a cascade-based training. I think Kevin talked a little bit about the buy-in during that cascade process. And we started not only seeing that, but also seeing that there was, I don't know if you have the game of broken telephone, which you tell someone something and that person tells another one, and we started seeing broken telephones all over. And there was actually a study by a student of mine, Marcela Costa, and very simple but very interesting study. She interviewed one person at the Minister of Education, Rosario Jaramillo, who I know some of you know. Rosario was leading the program at the Ministry of Education. And the interview was wonderful, and she explained all the pedagogical strategies and all the way that citizenship competencies can come to the schools and can be promoted and can be evaluated. And then Marcela went to the state level, and she interviewed someone from the education sector at the state level. And the interview was okay, but not great. And then she went to the municipal level in a town called La Calera. And in La Calera, she did the same interview, and it was really bad. And then she went to school in La Calera and asked about citizenship competencies. And the answer she got, what citizenship competencies sounds familiar. So that's the broken telephone right there. So we were expecting to have a huge change in pedagogy throughout the country, but the way the system was designed was not reaching that. And we also started understanding that many people started feeling like the standards were imposed by the Ministry of Education, imposed from Bogota, from the capital. They even told us, how can you standardize children? And how can you standardize children in such a diverse country as Colombia? And I remember having discussions like saying, well, we want to promote respect for diversity. In order to have respect for diversity, we need empathy. And we need inclusion. And those aspects need to be shared. But it was very difficult. And many people rejected the program. And right now, like thinking backwards, I think big problem was that everything was designed top down, designed from Bogota, and also that we were saying the what, but not the how. So the top down, we did not realize it at the moment, but the problem of the what but not the how was very clear for us at that time. So that's when we created Aulas en Paz. That's the origin of Aulas en Paz. We say we need to create some alternatives in which people could see how citizenship competencies could be promoted. And so we were inspired by several great programs around the world. I was very much inspired by the Montreal Prevention Program by Frank Pitaro and Richard Tremblay. And we created a program that could be, the way we thought about it, that could be implemented in a context where there are high levels of violence, but that it could have a good impact. So, and we evaluated the program several times. We created a multi-component program in which there was a universal curriculum, but also targeted intervention for those who needed the most, but very much inspired by Tom Dishon and other researchers. We try not to put those who needed the most, those who were being more aggressive together, but to put them together with the most prosocial classmates. So we created small groups with 2 children who were being very aggressive and 4 who were very prosocial. And they worked in extracurriculum times, many times with the facilitation of university students who were doing the practicum and who will go to different schools to help those small groups. And we also had work for parents, and we know that parents who come to parent meetings at the schools are usually not the ones who need it the most. So again, inspired by what Tremblay and Vitaro were doing in Montreal, we organized home visits to them. Home visits to the 10%, the families of the 10% most aggressive children in their classrooms. So that's a multi-component program from kindergarten to 5th grade. 4th grade was dedicated completely to bullying. The program is still running. It's, how old is it? 18 years old. We focus on 8 citizenship competencies. All of those competencies are in the standards, but we knew that the standards had many competencies, so we decided to focus on 8 and try to do more work with them. 3 of them are directly related to prevention of bullying. One is empathy, empathy most for the victims, critical thinking, and critical thinking is crucial so that you don't have to follow what others are telling you to do. And that's crucial, for example, for the assistance of bullying, that many times they don't like what the leader of the bullying is doing, but because of peer pressure and because of fear for the leader, they continue doing it. So we wanted to have some distance about it, so we worked on critical thinking and assertiveness. Assertiveness as a way to respond to aggressions in non-aggressive ways. And also to intervene as bystanders. So the program has been implemented in these 18 years in about 500 schools, mostly in Colombia, but also in Valparaiso, Chile, in Monterrey, Mexico, and has also been an inspiration for the curriculum in Peru. In Peru, they do have a national curriculum, and they have the program was crucial for that. And we have done several rounds of evaluation, first more qualitative, and then more like randomized and controlled. And I was very much inspired by Christina's presentation this morning and how she said that we have to learn from failures and we have to learn from difficulties. We have had many difficulties with the program, and I just want to point to 3 of them. One is fidelity. We are always worried, and whenever we see what happens directly in the schools, sometimes we get worried because it's not what we plan. And we have been very concerned about teacher training. We found out that the program is full of activities and a cooperative learning and role plays and a lot of activities. And we very quickly found out that teachers had not received that training before. In their previous pre-service training, they did not learn about socio-emotional competencies. They did not learn about conflict resolution. They did not learn about bullying. So in a way, we had to compensate for what they did not receive in their pre-service training. And we have been very concerned about sustainability. So whenever we work in some schools, and then we will work in the schools usually 2 or 3 years, and then we will move to other schools. And then if we go back many times, the program is not implemented as the way we thought that it was going to be implemented. And only the teachers move a lot from one school to the other, and only the teachers who were really involved remain doing it, but not as a whole school program. So again, thinking back, we think that there could also be a problem of bringing something to the school as a top-down initiative, design from Bogota, design from a university, without including what the schools were already doing or could be doing. The year after that we created the program in 2006, there was a big movement in Colombia related to bullying. As in other countries, the movement was promoted from the media and especially related to cases that were very hard, hurtful cases that were in the media. And we got more and more involved in research, trying to understand bullying in the context. We had many conferences throughout the country, and we had a very important alliance with Red Papás, which is an association of parent associations, an alliance of parent associations. And we continue with an alliance with the government. So there was a huge movement in which the media played a role, a very important role, and we received finance from the government, from private sector, from international organizations, and I think I can say that from 2006 till the present, there has been a very important change in national perception. So, for example, at that time, it was very common for people to say, even in public places, people will say, well, that really doesn't happen here. That's something that it was imported from United States, it was imported from the UK, it's in the movies, but it's not something that really happens here. That was very common. The other thing, I remember talking with many principals who will say, no, in my school, there is no bullying in my school. And then in the National Test of Citizenship Competencies, we included some questions about bullying. And one of the first analyses that I did showed that in each school in the country, there was bullying. There was no school with zero bullying. That doesn't happen. So there was that tension between like previous beliefs and what we were finding through research. Many would be saying, well, it's not as bad, it makes you stronger, some moral disengagements there, and also aggression is acceptable. And we also found in our research that many people think that aggression is acceptable, especially in the most violent context. And we were in one of the most violent countries in the world. So it was very common to people to believe, and the same for children and adolescents, that it's okay to use violence, aggression to get what you need. And it's definitely okay to use aggression if someone hurts you. If someone punches you, the best thing you can do is to punch back and harder. And parents will be saying that to their children. That was the main lessons of many parents. You have to protect yourself. You have to be more aggressive against the other ones. Well, right now, things have changed, at least in this respect. Right now, it's very clear that there's a high incidence of bullying, that bullying is all over, and especially that it's not acceptable. And it has many effects, and that there are other ways to defend yourself. You can use assertive ways of defending yourself. And I want to forward to 10 years ago. So we were still working in Aulas en Paz. We were still doing many conferences and many appearances in the media talking about it. And in 2013, especially some lawmakers from the Congress, the the House of Representatives and the Senate, probably they saw it as a political opportunity to be visible, to say, well, I'm the one who's defending children. And it's okay. They saw that as an opportunity. So at that time, they promoted several proposals for laws at the same time. And there were like 7 proposals running at the same time. And the Ministry of Education said, wait a minute. Let's take all the proposals and try to create something coherent. And again, they looked for us for advice. So it was a time in which I was running to the House of Representatives, talking to senators, trying to convince people about what they could be doing, reading at the proposals, making changes, and all of us in the group, we were very much involved in that. So what happened? There's a law called everyone knows it as Ley de Convivencia Escolar, the Convivencia Law. And it's not only about peaceful relationships, but it's the main part of the law. And it has different components. One is that each school needs to have a convivencia committee, a group of people who are working specifically on these issues and who are managing the cases and trying to promote the topic in their schools. And at the same time, each municipality, there are 1,000 municipalities in Colombia, each one should have a committee to deal with issues of convivencia, and there would be one national committee working on these issues, not only in the Ministry of Education, but several ministries working together. At the same time, the law says that each school should have some prevention initiative. And the prevention initiative should be inspired on the promotion of citizenship competencies. And each school should have protocols to decide how to manage cases when something affects the relationships and the climate in the schools. And they should report some of the cases to a national database. Those are like the 4 main components of the law. So you will think that, I don't know what you will think, but I would probably think that this is great. So finally, we're gonna have prevention programs all over. We're gonna have protocols all over. We're gonna have a huge database with wonderful data. And no. But first, let me explain. I mentioned that the law has 3 ways of managing cases, situations 1, 2, and 3. And I want to explain a little bit more because I also think that it relates to the discussion that we had today about the definition of bullying. So the idea is that schools should be able to differentiate what happens. Not everything is bullying. There are many other issues that probably need different responses. So, situations type 1 is basically interpersonal conflicts in which there is no power imbalance. So, just like a conflict among friends in the playground. That does not imply repetition, and that there are no big power imbalance. Situations type 2 have power imbalance and are systematic and they repeat it. That's bullying, mostly. And situations type 3 is what we started calling school violence. And that's when there are weapons. That's when there is some act of that is actually criminality, sexual exploitation, for example, or that involves gangs, or that involves drug trafficking. There's drug trafficking increasing in the schools in Colombia, which is terrible, it's very worrisome. So those are different, it's a different type of problem. It's at a different level. So, so the law states very clearly that if you have conflicts, you need to deal with them immediately, and here are 3 examples of how you can deal with them. Just the ideal is that the students themselves learn to deal with interpersonal conflicts directly, just by negotiating, understanding the point of view of the others, try to reach an agreement, and if that's hard for them, peers can help. So the idea is to promote peer mediation, in which some classmates or some students from other grades will learn how to promote mediations, and will try to promote a mediation among their classmates. Or adults can promote mediation. For bullying, what we helped design for the law was to have protocols inspired by restorative justice. So very much inspired by the work by Anatole Picas, which Christina referred to this morning, non-confronting, and followed by a process of repairing the damage. And for school violence, what the law very clearly states is that schools should not deal with these situations by themselves alone. They need to be working with other institutions. And what was happening before that is that there was actually a tension, especially between the police and the schools. The police saying, well, that involves criminality, we should be involved. And the schools were saying, no, this is our territory, you should not enter. Here, the idea of the law is that you have to collaborate. You have to work together between the police, social services, family support services, and different institutions, whatever is available in your area, because in many areas there are limited resources, but they should work together because it's something that is beyond what the schools are able to manage. So those are the 3 types of situations that each school should know how to manage. So what has happened in this 10 years? What we are seeing, sorry, and there was a recent study in Colombia by a governmental institution, Procuraduría, I don't know how to say Procuraduría in English, that tried to see how much of this is being implemented. And what we are seeing is that the committees are implemented all over. I mean, what is easy to implement, they do it. So it's easy to create a committee and to write, okay, we sign and the committee has been created. The prevention programs, very little, very little. Some isolated programs. In most of the schools, some isolated actions. Like there's some very committed teacher who will do something, and there's someone else who will do something else, but very little, no structured programs, and almost no evaluated programs. I think a program would be an exception. Most of the programs were not evaluated. In terms of the protocols, what we have seen is that there is a huge tradition of punitive justice. And there is a huge pressure, probably pressure especially from parents, saying you need to find who is responsible for this, and you need to sanction or expel the children who are responsible, the students who are responsible. So it has been very difficult to promote a different type of justice, more restorative justice. What we feel that many times there's a tendency to look for vengeance, and punitive justice is very much close to vengeance. But I have to say that restorative approaches are growing very quickly, especially in big cities like Bogota or Medellin. There's an expansion. There are a lot of schools getting more and more committed to restorative justice. And also, restorative justice was a big part of the National Peace Accord with the guerrillas, with FARC. So there's a lot in the media, and everyone is talking about what does restorative justice mean. And about the reports to the national database, we still have few reports from most municipalities. There are some exceptions, but we still have very limited data. So again, the question is, what has happened? It's been 10 years. And also, this is a law. And whenever I speak with people, I don't know, from other countries, I have been working a lot in Germany. They say, well, if it is a law, why is not implemented? And it's hard to explain. Laws are not completely implemented, and many times they're not really implemented in many countries. So the idea is that you can change society by creating new laws, very limited in many countries around the world. So many times there's not enough training, not enough resources. There are many schools that say, well, we have that person doing work for peaceful relationship, yeah, so we can check. We already do work on this. So just any action can be enough to comply with the law. The law actually includes some sanctions, but I have been very surprised that there have been very few sanctions to schools not complying with the law. I still don't understand why. And again, the how is a very important question. And the top-down seems very important. So I just want to summarize what I have been saying. There are many policies, the standards, the national tests, even our program, Aulas en Paz, that were designed in Bogota. And we, with the Ministry of Education, the Congress, research groups, it was designed there and it was implemented in the rest of the country. And thinking backwards, I think what we thought about local actors, we expected them to learn, implement, and sustain what we are bringing to them. And I think that has been a big mistake. So, meanwhile, what have we started seeing at the local level? The local level, we are seeing many people very creative with new alternatives, new strategies that they themselves are working by themselves. So, based on their own priorities, based on their own diagnosis of what is happening in their context, many of them led by students, led by very innovative and committed teachers, some supported by specific secretaries of education. Bogota has been doing an incredible work in this, Medellin too. And these secretaries of education have been creating opportunities for them to share what they're doing. So there is a big movement going from the bottom up. And they receive recognition. But then, from my point of view of researcher, I'm very, I don't know, I feel like a dilemma. Like, if I'm very excited about the new ideas that are coming from the bottom up, but I'm worried that many of them have very limited research or no research behind, and many times they're not receiving feedback. Like, they will be creating a new initiative, sharing it with many people, but not receiving any feedback or any suggestion or any idea of how to improve it. Many times it's just like praise. They receive praise, but not ways in which they can improve what they're doing. So what we have seen is that in the last years, it has been become very clear for us that there is a top-down and bottom-up movement that do not coincide, that are not coherent, they're not speaking to each other, and at the same time, it kind of gets into a polarization because many times it becomes ideological. It's like, no, I support the bottom-up and I don't want to hear about the top-down. And from the point of view of the top-down, it's like, no, you don't have research, you don't have evidence, I'm not going to trust what you're doing. So what I'm seeing is that there are benefits and limitations of each approach, and I want to just try to point some of them. Benefits of the top-down, definitely research, and that is usually well-structured. Limitations is that it can be felt imposed. The idea is that if you don't create something, you don't really own it, you don't feel empowered. And actually, Dan Ariely, who's at Duke, very close to here, has been working a lot on the motivation of doing something by yourself. If people bring you something, you're not going to be really motivated into that. And so that means that it's less sustainable, and it has the problems of cascade, the problems of the buy-in that Kevin was talking about yesterday, and the broken telephone that I mentioned earlier. From the bottom up, we see a lot of motivation. I mean, what we're seeing in that bottom-up movement is incredible. People really, really committed. And then if they do it, they're going to be sure that it's going to be sustained. It promotes democratic participation, and it's also very coherent with a very diverse country in terms of very culturally diverse country. But at the same time, lacks rigorous evidence. Because of that, we don't know if what they're doing is beneficial or can be even detrimental. It's many times based on their own intuitions, and it's also hard to question beliefs that are rooted in their context. So, for example, there are still many contexts in which homophobia is very common. So it's very hard, and we are not seeing, like, from the bottom up changes in what has been there for many years. Even on the contrary, we sometimes see like reproduction of discriminatory beliefs. So I guess you can imagine that where we're trying to get is to combine the two, to reach a synthesis of the top-down and bottom-up. So I have just 3 ideas about how we can promote this, and we have actually started some of the work related to those 3 ideas. So the first one might be interesting to define some core aspects that from research we think they're crucial, like some core principles, and then let the creativity at the bottom up identify ways in which that can be promoted. So thinking about this, I identify 6. I'm not sure if you share them with me, but I'll mention them. I think it's very clear that if we want to prevent bullying, empathy, especially empathy for victims, is crucial. The way we have been thinking about empathy is not that you have or you don't have the ability to feel empathy, but you have a circle in which those who are inside, you're empathic for them, and if you move outside the circle, empathy falls. So what we are thinking here is increase the size of the circle. So that might be one principle. The other one is assertive ways to defend yourself or assertive ways to intervene to defend others. So non-aggressive but firm ways to intervene. Bystanders, I think that's very clear for from the research that several of you have been doing in these years. For us, it has been crucial to differentiate what we call situations 1, 2, and 3. And we know that there can be some gray areas that are difficult to understand. Is this type 2, type 3? And we're still working on it, but has been very useful for schools, and it has been very useful for policy to have that differentiation. And I will say definitely we have to do something that is crucial, and again, there's a lot of evidence showing that we have to be working on preventing moral disengagement, even though there are very few studies about ways in which the moral disengagement can be prevented. And restorative justice, what we're seeing is very exciting what we're seeing about the use of restorative justice practices to manage cases of bullying. And so that's an idea of six core aspects or 6 principles. And then we can, so from the top down, we can identify these areas. From the bottom up, there can be many ways in which you can promote empathy, for example. There's many ways in which you can promote restorative ways of managing situations of bullying. So that's one idea. Second is that I think we have to move into a real dialogue between top-down and bottom-up. And for example, before having something like a national policy, like right now thinking backwards of what we could have done differently 20 years ago, it would have been very interesting, for example, to say, okay, we're not going to have these standards and all of this in the whole country. We're going to identify some municipalities and have real dialogue at the local level in which we're saying, we're proposing these, let's try it, some time to have the pilot of that and then make changes to what is being prioritized, and then it will have more legitimacy and it will respond more to the local context before you do something that reaches a whole country. There should be more cultural adaptations. We should be more open. For example, as researchers try developing something, we should be more open to having cultural adaptations and trying to have something that remains coherent with the basic principles behind, but with new alternatives, and also so that the people at the local level are clear that they are able to add value to what's happening. Then they will be more committed to what's happening. There should be more constructive feedback. I don't know in your countries, but in my country, it's not that common to give constructive feedback. It's more common to give negative feedback or no feedback. But to say it in a caring way, to suggest ways in which you can improve what you're doing, it's something that is, I think, is crucial, and we need to have more communities of practice in which people are able to share and receive feedback and improve all the time, and we as researchers should be involved in those conversations. We have been creating platforms, toolboxes in which people share what they're doing. There's one, it's in Spanish, but I really recommend it. It's Pasa tu Idea. It's between the Ministry of Education and an association of civil organizations, which is called Educapaz, from which we are part of it. But Pasa tu Idea is sharing many initiatives, but there's no curators. So there's no one like looking at what people are sharing and giving positive feedback. We should be moving more into that. So that's a real dialogue which I referred to. And there should also be more research about the bottom-up initiatives. And the third idea that I have is we should be working more on pre-service teaching. Pre-service teacher training. So all the teachers in pre-serving schools and when they're being trained to become teachers, all of them should receive training about how to promote socio-emotional development among their students and about their own socio-emotional development. I think that's something that we're lagging behind very much. Also on how to promote constructive classroom climates, on research, but not only on research about using research, which is crucial, it's very important, but also on producing research that is action research, local research is very useful. And finally, I think all of them should receive training about how to promote restorative justice. So these are 3 basic ideas about how to do that integration. I hope they're useful for you, whatever you're working on. So thank you very much. So I think we have some minutes if there are some comments, suggestions, questions.
If you have any questions, you can line up behind the microphones. Thank you.
Imagine me back in grad school, right? Like, Jesus, the poor professors. I thought you were going to say something, and then you didn't start saying it when you started differentiating between conflicts and bullying and school violence. You said but, like it felt like there was a but, and then you said but, and then you went to a slide that differentiated them, and I'm still waiting. So were those, you said obviously sometimes they're hard, they're slippery, is it this or is it that? Was there more, can you tell us a little more about how that went, that process, and responding differentially across those different contexts or situations?
My general perception is that it's going well. It has been useful to do that differentiation. And I will also say that not only for managing cases when they occur, but also for prevention. So for prevention, even the competencies that you need to prevent bullying are not the same as those you need to manage conflicts constructively. And also it has been very useful so that people are not saying everything is bullying. So it's a way for schools to respond and say, well, let me understand what is happening, and to know that if it is bullying, then we're going to treat it with the protocols that we need to have initial individual conversations, and then to try to reach an agreement based on restorative justice. If it is interpersonal conflicts, they should be treated differently. So I'm very worried when everyone kind of confuses things and puts everything in the same bag. And I think we have, in these 10 years, we have been able to promote that differentiation. So in general terms, I will say that it has been working well.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
So my thought, what a great presentation. I like the way you took us through the history. My whole thought while you were talking, and I wonder if you've had the same experience, which is you kind of described exactly what happens in many systems all over the world, whether we're addressing bullying, intimate partner violence, child maltreatment.
So what you're saying is that there's something similar in the top-down, bottom-up for other issues, dealing with other issues?
I think applying the top-down, bottom-up issues may fit. I think the history of the arc of identifying, coming in with laws and motivation to change, and isn't that horrible, followed by mandated reporting laws across this country in minutes. But funding went down, training never showed up. Child maltreatment system got completely overwhelmed as soon as they started getting all kinds of data, much like there's more going on in the school than just bullying. It just kind of became very helpless, and we have a problem. Identified domestic violence, it can't even trickle into the child maltreatment world.
Okay, so I'm glad this is helpful for other issues, and yeah, I think we have to look for alternative ways of working from the public policy, and I guess that speaks also about the role of us as researchers who are informing policy, but we have to be very careful, because many times we are so focused on designing the policy without thinking too much about how it was going to be implemented, how is it going to be received, and there can be some big mistakes that make the potential impact be affected.
It was really exciting to see all of the thinking that you put into this and to take that and apply it to my own thinking. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Kevin.
Really? So no one else wants to jump in ahead of me, because I'll just keep asking questions.
Go ahead.
So anytime someone says, yeah, it's either this or that, like you're either with us or against us, I balk at that. And so top down versus bottom up, it's a false dichotomy, because there is a third way, let's say, which isn't just, say, an integration, but, and I'm promoting here. So the organization I started working with started out with one board out of 72, where a clinical psych was sort of like, we need more systematic supports. And that person sort of managed to get enough momentum, staying close to the board level and the superintendents of the boards and the principals and so forth, but also then reaching up to the policymakers. And now 10, 15 years later, they've just introduced, mandated for schools to be doing this mental health work that we've been at, sort of the organization has been saying, wouldn't it be great if we did this? Yeah. And so there are models of middle way. But of course, we're not, like, put up your hand if you're a policy trained person. Like, you're at a bullying conference, so who's been trained in public policy? Or, like, this is a weakness in our sort of collective efficacy as researchers and academics, and like reaching out to policymakers to understand their needs and how that process happens. Yeah. It just might be, something to focus on maybe in a future session, this future year. Yeah. But yeah, in terms of your experience working with policymakers, how do you get them to do what you know needs doing?
First, I want to say that there's a time frame issue very complicated with policymakers, because many times they have 4 years, and in the first year they're only planning what they're going to do, and in the last year they're finishing, so they have very little time. So something like you were mentioning requires a lot of time to work. I mean, something that combines top down and bottom up requires a lot of time, and usually policymakers want to do things so that they can show that they did it. So that's very difficult. And the other thing is that I guess my experience has been very different for different ministers of education, and some of them, like Cecilia Maria Vélez, was very convinced from the beginning, and that was a priority for her from the beginning. If it is not a priority for them from the beginning, it's very little what you're able to do. You can do things with the people who are more in intermediate positions, who are more stable. They are the ones who can think in the longer term. And they are the ones who appreciate and are able to do a lot of changes. But it's difficult when that person in the middle has the support of the ministry who says, this is a priority and we're going to put a lot of funding here, than when that person has to fight to get a little bit of funding. So priorities in the end are reflected in money, in how much they put into that. So I guess depends a lot on the preconditions of where do you start? Yeah.
Hello. Do the institutions that prepare the teachers in Colombia have set the curriculums for convivencia or bullying, or is this being measured, or is it just a goal?
We're starting right now. Sorry. My university is doing it, especially because people from our research group have been the head of the school. And we are right now creating a network of institutions working on this. But the network, I mean, it's only like 5 or 6 schools. So it's a very small minority, but that's one of the goals right now. And right now we have actually a vice minister of education who's very close to us, who this is a priority for them, so we see it as an opportunity. But it's only beginning, and we still have a lot to do. We can speak in 4 years, and I will let you know what we achieved. So thank you so much. Thank you very much for the ideas.